Hello everybody, welcome to this live drafting tutorial. My name is Charlotta. If you're new to my channel, welcome. Please subscribe to get lots of videos all about pattern cutting, or head over to Instagram where I have even more tips. Tonight I'm going to show you how to draft this 1980s statement collar. And I've already done an analysis live on Instagram, but you can also watch it on here, where I go through how it all works, what it's made of, and also different versions from a sort of similar time. Oh, I can see Sharon has joined us. Hello, Sharon. Lovely to have you. Ready to draft some statement sleeves. And it's weird because I normally there's a big discussion when does something become vintage? So one of my best friends is very judgmental, and she says that's 80s is still pre-loved. I think she goes, rule is the rule, 40 or 50 years. But anyway, I think as long as it's pretty, I don't mind where it's from. And Wendy B is saying, ooh, 80s, my era. It's this weird thing. It's when you still remember something. Like I remember the 80s, so it just always feels like can't be very old. And hello, Jen, lovely to have you here as well. So let's get ready to draft some sleeves. And I can see, if you want to, I can see there's quite a few of you watching. If you want to ask any questions throughout, feel free to do so in the chat. You can also, if you see something you like to draft, let me know over Instagram. Send me a message or tag me in something you like. And lots of you always do. This top was inspired by another 1980s, and this is by Pauline Triguier, which I had never heard of before. But Nadia, who's one of my lovely patrons, she asked she asked me to look at this top, and that inspired my hunt for Pauline Triguier. And I'm sure you're the same, that if you start looking at things online, you suddenly go down into a complete rabbit hole. You find so much beautiful stuff, and then all your plans of what you're going to draft go completely out of the window. I'm going to quickly talk about, because we talked about in analysis a bit about how these are like an oversized epaulette and how it's all about the angles. I'm just going to cut some fabric out. Now put my lady on there. It's always either too tall or too small. Tonight she's too tall. Okay. So let's see how I can do that without it wobbling. So the basic shape, if I switch the other camera on as well. That's better. So the basic shape for this sleeve is basically like a diamond shape, very long and slightly. So in theory, this sleeve is nothing but a diamond, which is sorry, I'm just trying to get her to actually, we can see this better. It's nothing but a diamond which is folded lengthways and then it gets stitched into your seams. And there's one wet dress, there's one seam which runs from the shoulder, roughly the center down, so like what princess seam. And then there's a second one which is your sleeve, but which then goes slightly forward off the side seam. And you can see they get stitched into that, and then it's just about the angles. You can see on this one, the angle is, for example, I think a bit too pointy. So you just by making the diamond less diamond, you get different angles. So you can sort of play around with how big you want it to be, where you want it to sit. And I would literally on your toile get a piece of paper. Even you don't need to fold it. I just fold it so it's a bit thicker. You can just lay a piece of paper on. But your outer edge, if you want it folded, which gives it a smoother edge, needs to be straight. But of course, if you're not bothered about it being a fold, you can easily then really play around with a curved edge, which will give you much more room to experiment with exactly what shape you want it to be. And then, of course, what you can also do, for example, is that you start adding a few gathers for even more statement. And quite often in that sort of period, they quite often do that, often out of beautiful silk or velvet. And of course, you can put the same type of epaulette or diamond, or whatever you want to call it. And I'd love to know what you call it. You can put it anywhere on your body. Wherever you have a seam or a yoke, you can put it in there. So imagine, like, I had an example of this really nice, it doesn't show up at all, of this really nice red dress. And it's like sort of wool or velvet dress, and then it has this really oversized silk. And that is sort of quite typical of the area, but it also makes a statement that you're using two different fabrics. But now we sort of know a bit more about it. Let's get drafting. So I'm going to just show you how it's drafted on the front, but of course it's exactly the same on the back. And watch your analysis for a bit more information about how I thought the back looked like. So I'm going to put it on a solo layout now and show you how it's drafted. So the shape itself of the sleeve is super easy. Oh, and Wendy's asking a great question. She's saying, would shoulder pads be used too? I actually think this specific style probably doesn't need it. It basically, it wouldn't hurt. But if you look at the angle, I don't think this one has shoulder pads. But you could add it. So it depends. Maybe if you're like, I'm quite straight shouldered, so I wouldn't add any more shoulder padding, because otherwise I look like an exaggerated 80s shape. But if you have more sloping shoulders, a tiny bit of a shoulder pad is nice. And what's even easier is that you know how I just showed you how you can gather the bottom one for extra bounce. And of course you can also do that to give illusion of a shoulder seam. So you could either just gather the bottom one a bit, or you actually add a little frill either out of the same fabric, or what's really nice if you use a like an organdy or something, or even, you know how you're talking about crin the other day. If you add something quite stiff in there to sort of hold it up, because what you don't want it is to collapse. So shoulder pad will help with it staying up. And alternatively, actually, if you, for example, if you want, this is quite a nice silk, but it probably would have been, there would have been another layer in between, which would be much stiffer to hold up the shape. So whether that's a specific interfacing fabric or tailoring fabric, or even something really lightweight like an organdy or organza. But basically you just want something lightweight to hold you your sleeves up. That's a really good question. Okay, so let's get started. So all you have to do is, once you decide what shape your sleeve is supposed to do, then all you do is you draw on your style line, so your seam. And I'm gonna sort of whiz through it a bit. But if you want to know more about dart manipulation in depth, have a look at my Dart Essential course. It's only £9 and it's amazing value because I did it when I just started out. So, and what's quite interesting is how wide you make the shoulder line. So I think so of course it's always tricky to see. It looks like the end of the satin sleeve is here. So I think it might just be like, I think it's probably about 5 centimeters away from the edge, but of course that's sort of up to you. And what's quite interesting is how it then, I don't think it goes through the bust point. I think the bust point is something like here. So again, it sort of goes slightly away from the bust point. So it's slightly curved, but it looks straight. And of course, the more you move it to the edge of your sleeve. So if I show you, for example, if I move it here, then it just becomes more pronounced. So it becomes more hourglass figure. Like, I'm going to look at the full. And then I think it's sort of nearly straight. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ignore this dart, but then I'm just going to move it slightly more. So you can see I've made it slightly still hourglass, but what you might find is that actually for you to really, it looks much better to have the seam here. So it really gives you an hourglass. But then all you do is, once you've decided what style line you want to do, is you, however wide your base dart is, you transfer that to either side of your seam, and then you shape it to your, just below your bust point, and that will give you the shaping. And I'm going to do one side first, make sure it's a straight line, and then I'm going to measure how long that line is. So that's 10.4, and then I'm going to pivot it, and it should be hitting the same type of the base, but it might be slightly below or slightly above, because of how you draw the volume. So this is my one side, and I will cut it out in a second so you can see how it actually looks like. But all I've done is I basically transferred my shaping from my original waist dart position to slightly to the side. And of course, waist darts, where we put them, are complete. It's not made up, but it's just like the most logical position. Where if you look at all the patterns, I often have 2 and stuff, or you might have 1 or 2. So it's just about using the same volume and sort of tilting it and moving it to the side. What I would suggest on your twirl, make a quick twirl first and see that it still fits, and you might sort of have to make it a little bit less or a little bit more, just because we're changing the angle. So the fit might change slightly, but in theory, it's like a dart pivot, but done on paper and without pivoting. And then the second thing is that I'm going to just move my dart point to my seam in the center, and then I can just redraw my dart, and then I can pause that in a second. So I'm going to change my dart into a shaped seam. So all I now have to do is cut into my dart, cut into my new line, and then I'm going to cut on both sides of my original waist shaping. So you can see I already done my shaping there. You can see how it looks slightly asymmetric, but it should work. So then the next thing I need to do is close my original dart. When suddenly all that shaping you can see is moved up there. So you can see how the shaping works. And then I just want to double check everything is the right length. And of course here the sleeves go nearly down to your waist, but of course you can decide how long you want your sleeves to do. I'm adding notches as I'm checking it's the right length, and I'm just walking my seams then, just checking everything matches. You can see how actually here, because I twisted it, it's slightly off. So what I'm going to do is redraw it in a second. And what you might have to do is do it on your file again, rather than on, so you can sort of redraw it on the paper, but just double check on your trowel that it is actually still level around and balanced around your waist. But this is my first princess line, and then what you would do is you make your pattern like this, you write your fold line on there with seam allowance, and then you just make sure you notch where the shoulder point is, and you transfer all of these notches basically onto your statement epaulette. So that's my first seam done. And then, as we discussed on Tuesday on live draft analysis, is that either the second sleeve just goes and points towards the side seam, but I think the second sleeve goes straight down. So it follows the armhole, but rather than angling to the side seam, I think it goes just very close. And it's interesting. I think I actually drawn this a bit too close to the center front. If you look at it, I think it's probably more here because it's quite a wide area. So that's why it's always good to double check what you're actually doing as you're doing it. Always recheck to what you're wanting to create, whether it's a sketch you've made, or a garment you're copying, because quite often I drew it closer to the center front because I always think that accentuates the curved hourglass figure. So I thought it was more flattering. But of course, if I wanted to recreate this image, my opinion is sort of not the point. In that case, you actually double check, and this looks like now out of proportion, so I would redraw it. But I'm going to leave it as it is for now. But just a note for any, if you actually try, if you're sort of working for somebody else or you're creating somebody else, always double check. You're actually not following what you think is best, but the image. So the second epaulette, I would just do through the original shoulder point on the armhole, and then I would just probably draw a line which is parallel to the side seam roughly, and hits the waist at roughly 90 degrees. Have I gone perfectly 90 degrees? Yes. So this is not quite parallel, but I've got 90 degree at the waist, which means that as I go further down, it's quite nice to have always either you have it really angled or you have a 90 degree hitting the waist if it goes down. So it's either straight or it's really angled. You don't want to just slightly. It sometimes ends up being that, but I always think it's if it's just instead of 90 degrees, 89 degrees, it's just going to look slightly wonky. But if it's like this, where it's say 80 or 75 degrees, then it looks good again. But this is going to be my second cutting line. So again, I'm just going to already mark my notches before I cut it out. here you have it. And then next week, this is nearly done. Let me know if you have any questions. Oh, Faye Kami is saying, good evening. Hello, Femi K. Lovely that you're joining us. And we're nearly done, but of course this will be available on rewatch. So, you can see our 3 pattern pieces. Oh, I haven't cut this one off. I thought, oh, that looks a bit long. So, and then again into this seam, again you make another, if you're using the identical sleeve, you just trace it through on paper, and you don't have the whole diamond, you can just have it half and mark this line, your fold line, and then just cut it on the folded fabric. But again, you lay it along the seam where you want it to be, and you can sort of, even on your, when you first try it on your trowel, and see how big you want it and the angle you want it, already there notch where you want it to hit the shoulder, because then you can just transfer that, double check that this notch matches, and then you just, again, you mark these notches here and there, and so you know it fits when you're putting it all together. But this is your statement sleeve all done. So it's really straightforward. All you have is a really nice 3-piece front, and of course then this side panel will get attached to the back. So you have this same panel on the back, this same panel on the back, and then the 2 sides become one, because you don't need your side seam because it's straight. So the shaping basically gets transferred into these seams. And then the last thing you do is just decide where your straight of grain is. I would imagine the straight of grain is parallel to center front. That's always a good start. And this, the collar, we talked about it a bit more, the neckline on the live analysis on Tuesday. It's either actually the straight a straight line which just continues from the center front, and then you just stop stitching the center front together wherever you want this keyhole to be, and then just separate it, or it's slightly angled. I actually suggested just doing a continuation of the center front, because it might just gape open as you put it on, but it's up to you. Otherwise you would just angle it slightly like that, and then you either line the whole thing, or you could actually have a facing in the same cloth, in the outer cloth, because you might sort of peek in, and then have this part lined, and then I would probably line the rest of the top as well. But of course you don't need to have the same seam lines, so you can just have instead of the seams, you can have just your normal darts on the lining. And then the last thing you do is decide where you want your straight of grain to be on the other panels, and I'm going to transfer it from the bottom, not the top. I'm going to keep my lower part of the side. Of course, you have straight of grain up here, continuing, which would then mean this is on bias, but I'm going to do it this way around. And then again, this is the side panel. Again, I'm going to do it parallel to the center front. So just lay it on again. And you can actually always mark your straight of grain before you cut it apart. And then again, you might actually have the spacing around the armhole like this. I don't think you actually need to have a facing on the armhole, because you don't see it at all. So you could just line it, which is more comfortable to there than having like a wool, because of course the main bodice is out of wool, and then the sleeves are sort of some sort of taffeta. And you can also, what I always find fascinating when you look at, I just noticed it here, it looks like there's a little bit of gathering going in, but I don't know if it's just not eased in, or if it's just the fabric behaving. But of course, if you add tiny gathers all along it, it's gonna be even more 3D. It's gonna spring out more. So try it when you're sort of holding it onto yourself. You could even use your original fabric and just fold it. The final fabric, just to see how it behaves, whether you need to interface it, whether you can fold it, whether you need to have a seam in the edge so you can make it shape. So the basic principle is really easy, but in the little decisions you make in shape and gathers or pleats, that's where you're going to get lots of really different looks. So this was my little, what's the time? Oh yeah, this was my live drafting tutorial for some 1980s sleeves. I hope you enjoyed it. Do let me know if you have any questions, or if there's something else you want me to look at. Do message me on Instagram or tag me in something. But I hope it was all clear, all made sense. A lot of you who joined me are you all sort of know now. You've been with me for a while. And yes, Jen just said it reminds me of the raffle I did the other day. And as soon as I saw your raffle, I thought, ooh, it's very similar. And if you haven't looked at it, look at Miss J C's. Yes, on Instagram. You can recognize her from her image as well. And she made a really nice, really bright floral, big ruffled shoulder, very similar, but more summery, I think, and probably more versatile. This is sort of quite a statement little black dress. But yes, it's very use this, but probably make more wearable. But I think it's sort of making us quite a lot of ruffles at the moment. But I quite like this sort of grown-up version, or grown-up version, but fun summer version Jen made. And a lot of them have become quite Laura Ashley at the moment. But of course, it's up to your personal tastes as well, what you like. But yes, so this is my interpretation of this 1980s Pauline Trugier dress. Have a look at the analysis to find out more about it, and I will do a few more clips about different types of statement ruffles over the coming week, stuff like that. And my favorite, which I dreamed about and then worked out how it's made in my dream. So I'll be releasing a few clips of that over next week. And Sharon said, I didn't get to watch analysis yet, so I will watch it now. And it's on YouTube, Sharon, so you can actually watch it on full landscape and see the details, because Instagram's always weird, because portrait and drafting doesn't really go together. Anyway, everybody, thank you so much for joining me. Enjoy the rest of your day or your evening. And I will actually be back on YouTube in 2 weeks with another drafting tutorial. I don't think it's on here, for a 1930s very glamorous dress. And hello Nadia, hello to Kuwait, and good night everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. Bye bye. Bye.